Um, Welcome back to the meeting. A very powerful patient story. There, can I restart the meeting by formally welcoming our new Chief Medical Officer, Helen Skinner, to her first board meeting. New Chief AHP, Alex Spirit, to her first board meeting, and interim Chief Nurse, Lynn Ware, who has had to duck out with the meeting. But can I also note that this is Aaron's last board meeting. So as this is the chair's report, this gives me a prime opportunity to embarrass Aaron. So on behalf of the Trust Board, can I thank Aaron for all that he's done for the Trust over the past 11 years. His leadership and tenacity to get things right has supported and empowered teams across the Trust to make significant improvements to the care that we provide to local communities. Aaron's professionalism, integrity, passion and support for colleagues and partners will be very much missed, but I'm pleased that he isn't going far and he's staying within the Lancashire and South Cumbria system. The only other aspects of my report to board that I'd like to highlight is that following a rigorous assurance process with non-exec directors and the Council of Governors, Scott McLean has been appointed as the interim Chief Executive. Scott will take up the interim CEO role from the 1st of November, when Aaron assumes his position as CEO at the ICB. There has also been a change to deputy chairs that has been approved by the Council of Governors. Previously, Dr. Karen Deeney and Sarah Rees were deputy chairs and shared those responsibilities excellently over the past few years. With Karen's agreement, she has stepped down from the deputy chair position, and Tony Oakman will be invited to fulfil this role alongside Sarah. I would therefore like to put on record my appreciation for the incredible work that Karen does as chair of the People Committee and everything she did whilst deputy chair. Karen is a highly valued and respected member of the board, and I was absolutely delighted that the Council of Governors recently agreed to reappoint her as a non-exec director for a further period of 3 years. I have also agreed to a request from Alison Cole to step away from her non-exec director role for a period of 6 months, and I'll be working with the other non-exec directors to ensure that Alison's areas of responsibility are covered. That is all I would like to say along with the contents of my written report. However, if anybody wishes to further embarrass Aaron, now is the time. So
firstly, thank you for kind words of taking up the interim into the board and you for their support. Appreciate that. The exec team are really looking forward to this bit. So it's not prepared. We just want to say best wishes to Aaron, and we appointed everyone else to these roles. And you're not only a chief exec, you are a mentor, a colleague, and a safe space, and we really value it. And we'll miss you. Might not be saying that in Q4, but on a truly on a professional and personal level, thank you, and we wish you well.
Thank you, Scott. Any further embarrassing of Aaron or any questions? Tony?
No questions, just to echo what you said, Chair. In a world where it seems people come and go and things turn over, I think I have to say it's quite remarkable that Chief Executive of Property Canada has been in this trust such a significant period of time, and with the team has generated and delivered such a sustainable set of improvements. And I think as interim chair, it was a pleasure to work with you. I'm absolutely, as they say in some parts of the country, over the moon that you're the new chief executive for the strategic ICB arena, because I think it's a real benefit for us as a system as well as for us as a trust. So thank you, and yeah, really pleased that Scott's on the interim role as well. So all the best.
Thank you. Nicola?
I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to share an observation that I made when I first joined the trust. Not only did I find Aaron an extremely welcoming CEO, gave you all the support you needed, ensured that you were getting all the support that you needed, but I went to our full one-day induction, and I arrived there, and Aaron was there at the start of the day doing what Aaron does. And people who know Aaron know what I mean by that. But I think the thing that I took away was that people didn't necessarily within that circle of staff that were going through that induction, they didn't necessarily know that I was a non-executive director at that point. And when Aaron left and we were having sort of just a bit more of a working on another piece of work around our values, there was quite a few staff who returning members of staff, or they were members of staff who'd already been working with us for a while. It takes a little time sometimes for you to get onto the induction. And what struck me, and I don't think I'd ever heard this in an organisation before, was how positive they were. And it was like, yeah, that's Aaron, that's our chief exec, he's a fantastic leader, we all love working for him.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, it's just keeping going, isn't it? I'm probably the only person here who was here as we went into CQC undertakings 4 years ago. Actually went into the maternity support programme and I had a number of undertakings placed on our licence. And I think, and the fact that Scott mentioned actually that you've appointed every single member of the exec team, I think it's really important to acknowledge the journey that the trust has been on under your leadership and the way in which you have rebuilt the board. We sort of rebuilt the governance with colleagues and brought us on this hopefully sustained journey of improvement so that the undertakings have been lifted. I know we have financial undertakings still, but in terms of quality and safety, and actually the place we are now in terms of our finances is so much stronger. And I know that's a team effort, but I think it's really important to acknowledge your role in doing that and in leading the board through that process.
Susie.
Yes, embarrassment please from the Council of Governors. Erin, I'd like to thank you as lead governor for the way you support the governors. I've been talking to other lead governors, discovering it's not the same in other trusts, and we appreciate it. You take us seriously, and that's really very enheartening, and it gives us an opportunity to do the work that I hope we do, which does help the trust. I'd also like to actually extend thanks personally. My patient story was very different because of you, and the support and mentoring you've given me as a lead governor that actually began not just as a governor but also in fact even before I was associated with the trust, and I thank you sincerely for that. Good luck. It's been watching.
Oh,
I think it would be remiss of us not to mention that you actually secured the local price modification for this organisation as well. As a finance professional, I know you take very seriously. You came here, the trust was in turnaround, and actually that was quite an innovative thing to drive and secure. I'm extremely proud of that from our professional network perspective, and I've got a number of organisations on my back asking me for the workings and the mechanisms behind that, which again, Aaron, is testament to you because that has filtered through the national network and grapevine, and people are talking about it. So well done.
Oh,
So I'm going to do a slightly more personal reflection. So I have been in the trust for nearly 9 years, and I joined here as an associate specialist, and I joined here with the intention of working at the university and doing clinical work, and strangely enough got dragged into leadership in the organisation, and Aaron and I did not always see eye to eye on many things, and I remember as the executive team left and Aaron has had to, using his own word, be very resilient and tenacious and rebuilding the team time and time again as things have changed and the situation within the organisation has changed. And actually other people have left because it is exhausting to constantly have to be working to improve the organisation, and you have stayed and you have to live a change. And even when things are difficult, you showed up for the organisation. you've represented us at a regional and a national level. You've also remained humble enough to engage with the colleagues that you work with. If you talk to people like the Porter team, I know their experience at this organisation is better for having you as chief executive. I know that multiple patients' experience in this organisation is better for having you as the chief executive. So thank you for staying and doing the difficult work. Very much.
Aaron.
Oh, thank you. Aaron, I could echo everything that everybody has said, but one I think of the most striking characteristics of your leadership is that it seems to not matter how much you progress or how high you fly, you absolutely always have your feet on the ground. And you absolutely always stay grounded in the experiences, the views and the stories of people. And in my experience, never fail to listen and respond to that in the most positive and difference-making way that you can. So I thank you for your authenticity, consistency, and particularly the groundedness in everyday lives and experiences of people. I think that's a really rare quality in a chief executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Some great reflections and some great points for the minutes. I think that concludes the chair's report. Now over to the chief executive.
So I just wanted to say a massive thank you for the feedback. It's really kind, difficult to hear. So it's been an absolute privilege to lead the organisation, and I couldn't thank the numbers of people that I would need to thank. There has been so many kind of colleagues at every level of the organisation had such an impact on me, including patients and partners. And it's always difficult as a chief exec, Scott, you will experience this in your career, others who want to do this, to represent and kind of take the feedback on behalf of others. It's always a team sport. I get the chief exec kind of has the remit and the mandate, but I have been blessed and continue to be blessed with some of the most talented, committed, brave colleagues. And it's been just really lucky for the last 11 years that we've had people that have wanted to come and do a bit and work with teams and listen to people and make the change and stick around when the difficult stuff's happening. And I know that's part of the DNA in Morecambe Bay. I can see it in this next round of leadership kind of conversation. So I'll leave. It's going to be very difficult for me, so bear with me for the next kind of 6 or 7 weeks or so, because this place has been such a big part of my kind of adult life, not just my career. So I'll miss it a great deal. But I'm leaving knowing that the trust is on a path now to continue to develop and improve its services for patients. But if there was one thing I would leave in my final board, it's the patient stories like Gemma's. And it's really easy at a board level to look at dashboards and metrics and the national guidance we get on what good looks like. And that's important because that's what we're asked to do. That's the kind of remit that we're given. But until every patient that crosses our doors every day has an experience that we'd all be proud to talk about, then the work's never done. Even if we get to 2 or 1 or outstanding, please just keep that kind of connection to the users of our service with an open arms, a listening ear, not so quick to say, but it's good everywhere else. And this is just a one occasion and we'll fix it. It's a mindset I think the Bay's developed over the last 10 years or so that I think will stand it in really good stead going forward. So yeah, massive thank you from me. I'm around for the next 6 or 7 weeks, Chair, so I'm not disappearing just yet. And I couldn't be more grateful for the teams that I've worked with, past and present, and the board colleagues here. Feel very lucky to have had this experience.
Anything else you want to add to your report?
Thank you, Chair. So, as always with my report, I frame this in a couple of sections: national, kind of regional, and local. Nationally, it's been quite quiet over the summer because of the recess. just yesterday, I was in London with a national leadership meeting, just talking about what the next couple of weeks are going to look like. So we used the phrase a little bit in the autumn chair about the handbrake coming off a little bit after summer. So to be expected over the coming weeks are things like what the ICB and regional blueprints are going to feature, how the strategic commissioning frameworks are going to feature. There is a piece of work ongoing around provider models and provider guidance. So I think a really well-timed piece of work is this October strategy session with the board. So hopefully over the coming weeks, as these national programmes start to develop, we can share with the board and use that for some really good engaging discussions for the next phase when we'll convey in October. Alongside the policy design and shift, there are two other pieces of work nationally that are featured. We've had guidance for planning come out in the last couple of weeks. I haven't called it planning guidance purposefully because it lacks detail, but what it does do is make clear the roles and responsibilities of the system in building plans. What's really positive and exciting is it responds to some of the challenge that the leadership teams have been given to the policymakers this last 12 months, that planning needs to be longer term. It needs to be better integrated. Its measures of success need to be not in the weekly, monthly and quarterly only metrics. And all of those things feature in this guidance for planning. Again, that's going to stretch us. We're used to planning on an annual cycle. We're used to the monthly, quarterly drumbeat. So I've been talking to the leadership structures in the organisation about, well, we've got what we asked for here. So we now need to respond differently. So how ambitious and innovative do we need to be? What decisions would we make differently for change and transformation if we knew it wasn't just a 6 or 12-month plan? So I'm looking forward to working in my new role and alongside the trust as to how we might kind of take advantage of some of that. And then there's the obvious focus here on winter preparations, which we've got on the agenda today, and our elective recovery programme, which we'll also talk about later on today. More locally, you've touched on some of the leadership changes. Thank you. Just to recognise that earlier in the summer, we had the CQC here for inspection activity for our maternity and urgent care services. Our teams performed really well. I want to thank them. I think it was, I might still be, one of the busiest shifts, Scott, that we've ever seen in the RLI on the day that they arrived. I think they do that on purpose, but it was the busiest shift we've had. The feedback we had on the care, compassion and team working in both maternity and urgent care was a pleasure to hear. There will be improvements coming from these reports, undoubtedly. Lots of them in our estate and the way that our urgent care infrastructure works, particularly at the RLI. Something around our operating models with clinical teams within urgent care, and there were some small issues around IT. So there are some things for us to improve, and I know teams are on with that already. We'll likely receive any final reports later in the autumn, and we'll update the board as they come through. And then just finally, Chair, an update on FGH ICU changes. Board are aware of the process that we went through last year on temporary suspension of level 3 delivery care at the ICU at FGH. We've had that alternative stabilised transfer model since that period. There are a number of pieces of work that have been taken forward objectively, sponsored by our integrated commissioning board with the Clinical Senate and the Critical Care Network that has put some proposals forward. Those proposals are now going through a due process with the commissioners, and we've got a scrutiny committee later this month. So we'll keep the board updated as to the final decision making and timing of the changes around level 3 ICU. In the meantime, our team's working really hard on making sure that that stabilised and transfer model is working really effectively, and any further improvements we need to make to that model are being developed and will be overseen by the relevant committees. That was it.
Thank you, Aaron. Everybody happy to note Aaron's report? Great. Item 49, the lead governor report. Susie.
Yes, just to pull out of what I said, and please take it as you read this. Thanks to Aaron that I put in here, and just to sort of have that minuted. Also that we are now beginning to see the results of the elections, in that we have actually quite a good number of staff and public who have applied for places on the Council of Governors, which is really good to see. Got one person who's walked into the South Lake without opposition, so that's all right. But we are losing Carol Donaldson, and I'd like to admit the fact that we really, really regret this. That she is not standing for a second term, purely because of pressure at work. And she has, obviously, she's much needed by the trust, and so we release her reluctantly to go and do her job, but we really did benefit from having her on the council, and we regret that. But interestingly enough, I think we've got a fight there. between candidates for her place, which again is very interesting. Apart from that, as read, any questions? Happy to take them.
Thank you, Susie. Karen.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Susie. It's not a question, it's just an addition to suggest to your extensive activity that you record in your report. And I just noticed I don't see People Committee there. And I know you and other governor colleagues are regular observers at that committee. So just a suggestion that's added in going forward so we capture everything you do. Thanks, Susie.
This particular report is on the period when I was in Canada and did actually. That's the reason.
Oh, that's okay. Your colleagues were definitely there. So thank you.
Right, I shall, okay, if we can add that in. Thank you, Catherine.
Super.
Oh, no, so you're not going to get rid of me, I'm afraid, on that one.
Thank you,
Observe.
Karen. If we're all happy to note the lead governor's report, great. We'll move on to item 50, the maternity update report. Lynn, you'd stepped out of the room when I welcomed you to the interim position, but you're back now. So welcome to the interim position. I will hand over to yourself and Susan.
So I'm going to hand over to Susan to provide the reports, please. Thanks, Susan.
Oh, good morning, everybody. I'll take the report as read, and just to note that this paper has already been considered by the Quality Assurance Committee. The headlines really are, I just wanted to call out the strategy and the leadership with the formation of our new division. And we had a great day together to determine our what our aims were. And we're working really, really well together as a division, which is absolutely excellent. The next thing I want to call out is our workforce. So by come September, we will have 0 midwifery vacancies. We will have them all appointed to, and we've not been in that place for a very, very long time. We've still got some neonatal nursing vacancies to fill, and we've got a plan around that. But certainly for midwifery, that's an excellent win for us. Mandatory education continues to score where we need to score, and we continue to have special arrangements for those that aren't in or lapse in their compliance. The risks, there's actually only one extreme risk now, and that is related to the neonatal post-mortem results. That has been escalated nationally now. There's not much we can do about it, but we are in constant contact with families who are awaiting post-mortems on their babies. The CQC Aaron's already spoke about, so I won't talk any more about that. We're on track for year 7 of the maternity incentive scheme, and we are awaiting to hear from the maternity support programme about what that will look like once we get the results back from CQC. In terms of maternity and neonatal improvement, we're now 89 out of the 100 actions complete and signed off, and that group is working really well. And the only issues of concern from the dashboard are highlighted there. So there's three areas. That's term admissions to the nursery, internal deflections of service, and percentage of women booked by 9 weeks and 6 days. I've actually de-escalated all of those from red to yellow, and they're really on there for monitoring at the moment, just to make sure we're going in the right direction before I take them off our concern list. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions for Susan or for Lynn? Sarah.
Thank you. I think just to confirm, we did receive these reports at Quality Assurance Committee, and we were assured by the progress that's being made in maternity. I did just want to note that one of the things that's in the report is you might see in the SPC charts is there's no data since January for a delayed induction of labour, and given that this is an area where there's a bit of a deep dive going on, we did seek some assurance around that. So the assurance or reassurance we're provided with is that daily safety huddles are taking place, and that's ensuring inductions are completely triaged and risk assessed, and obviously that work is continuing to take place on that data, and we are due to receive an update on that deep dive at the October Quality Committee.
Thank you, Sarah. Karen.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate this may have been picked up already through quality assurance. I'm just looking at table 5, Susan, on page 54 and the delayed off-track improvement actions. I can see the target completion dates. I just wonder whether there are now revised completion dates for those 2 actions.
Yeah, we actually revised them just this week because
Okay.
it was time for us to. We look at our plans every month, and we did it just yesterday morning. Actually, both of these items are a little bit out of our control. We are assured that the Muse and Newts will go live in September and November, so that's still on. We're not. We haven't heard anything to the contrary. So we'll just continue to watch that space. And with regard to Badgernet, that absolutely does need reviewing because there needs to be a bit more work on the business case than we anticipated, which Caroline Calman, one of our heads of midwifery, is leading. She's on leave this week, but when she comes back, I'll sit down with her and we'll work out a revised date. But we've got that in our diary to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. If there are no further questions, is the board happy to approve the report for assurance? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. We'll turn now to item 51, the biannual mortality report, and I ask our Chief Medical Officer, Helen Skinner, to introduce the report.
Thank you. So I'll take the report as read, but there are a number of areas to highlight. We've had the red alert around COPD and bronchiectasis, and as part of that, we're doing mortality reviews on all deaths with those conditions to look at whether there's anything that could be done differently around that, and that has not identified any areas in terms of alerts. Also, as part of that, obviously the medical examiners and are involved in all deaths. You can see that in terms of the 100%, and again, no alerts on that. Also, just want to draw your attention that we do, just to show that we are doing a number of these reviews, and that's in part related obviously to things like the red alerts that I've just mentioned, is that we're doing 37% of all deaths as part of a structured judgment review, looking at whether any are preventable. That is significantly higher than most nationally in terms of that 10 to 20%. Notice there around, although it's not alerting, around patients who've experienced fractured neck of femur, and we're continuing to monitor that, although it's not alerting and still as green, that has previously, and there is a program of work looking at how we can continue to improve care for patients after they've sustained a fracture of the hip. Also within that, we have we've also explained around some of the coding delays. So although we are still remaining green for SHIMI and RHSMR, you can see that there has been some change to that, that we're concerned from a coding point of view, that we are behind on coding. And there's been a task and finish group that I know that the Chief People Officer has led, and we've looked at mitigation to attempt to get back on track in terms of our coding, because that's been concentrated on our elective care rather than non-elective care, which is where these cases would be. And the impact of that is that we would have less expected deaths because of that coding, and therefore our observed deaths is higher, and that's why we're seeing some changes around the SHIMI and the HS. The other areas just to highlight is around the 3 cases in terms of that have gone in terms of PSSI, and just that there have been obviously action plans developed which are being worked through. And also just to highlight the learning obviously from the statutory coronial system in terms of the prevention of future deaths notice, and there's an action plan that's being worked through. Obviously you've heard earlier from Lynn and also from Susan around the extensive work that's gone on around improving maternity care. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions for Helen? If not, are we happy to note the contents of the report? Yeah. Thank you very much, Helen. If we turn to performance and the integrated performance dashboard, can I ask the Deputy Chief Exec, Scott, to present?
Thank you. We'll go in order with Lynn and Helen first with quality and safety, then Ali with people, Helen with finance, and then me with access. So Helen and Lynn.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with the main bits of the quality and safety report. So from a patient safety incidence point of view, the data is showing common cause variation, and our incidence causing moderate or above harms remains below the median, so no concerns there. From a PSERV point of view, we've had one incident recorded through STICE in June, and that was a maternal death post-discharge, which is going through the normal maternity investigation processes. And a primary review has already been presented to executive review group. The lady was quite high risk and had some sort of challenging life choices as well. The current position with patient safety incident reports, we've had to date 28 commissioned. One has been removed as not required. 8 have been completed, 2 completed and presented at the Learning Response Group since the last report. And of the remaining 19, 16 of those are overdue. All PSIIs have an allocated learning response lead, which is an improvement of 4 in month. We still have an issue that we have no substantive learning response leads in post. There are 3 posts there ready for staff to go into. They're still on track awaiting sign off, but it's part of the phase 2 changes to individuals. From a complaints point of view, with no complaints over 6 months, we're still having some complaints moving into the 5-month area, which we're concentrating on to get that down even further. And a marker of quality is 0 complaints requiring a revisit, 10 data points below, and which is showing improvement overall, and 16 data points above median for compliments. So a big focus there continues. The duty of candour point of view of 101 incidents, a letter was sent within 10 days in 96 cases, which is 98% compliance. The information in brackets, because this is bi-monthly board now, I've put last month's in the brackets. So from a falls perspective, 83 overall falls, 58 with no injuries and 24 below harm, 1 moderate harm, but no lapses in care when that was reviewed. Of interest is 34 of those had a clinical forensic score of 5, which classes them as vulnerable. 23 patients fell more than once, and of those, most of them fall with sort of non-falls before they came into hospital, and 15 of those did not meet criteria to reside at the time. Pressure ulcers, category 2 pressure ulcers remain static around the 40 mark, but we continue to focus on those. We've had 3 category 3 pressure ulcers, and 2 of those had no lapses in care, but incidental learning involved on those, and no category 4s for a significant length of time for well over a year. The family and friends test, we've had 580 pieces of patient feedback, which is face-to-face feedback, because we've changed the methodology. You'll be aware that we withdrew from the contract earlier this year. We've had some delays in implementing the in-house solution, which is ready to go now. And the final hurdle to that is that I3 have gone into one LSC and have asked for again sharing that. So we've agreed to that. So looking at the end of September now. I suppose the important point is we want to continue with those face-to-face feedback sessions, because that's live feedback and it's much more meaningful. Mixed sex accommodation breaches continue to have fairly high numbers, 25 of them related to ICU, and 1 related to the use of an acute stroke bed at FGH because of flow issues overnight, which will have been approved by the clinical site managers. Infection prevention, I think the thing to pick out from that is the 23 cases of gram-negative bloodstream infections, which were healthcare associated. This is a really tricky group of infections which are related to E. coli infections. Many of those patients come into hospital with long-term family catheters, but because it occurs in hospital, they become a hospital-acquired infection. Doing a lot of work around catheter passports and some extra work with care homes and community teams. And that's that for me, and I'll hand over to Ellen for BT.
Thank you. So BT, as you note, there is 73.5%. It's obviously under where we need to be and where we want to be in terms of providing care. The most up-to-date figure is actually we've got now is from July, which is actually further improvement at 76.2% ahead of trajectory set by the Quality Assurance Committee. 75% on 1st of August, so on track in terms of the improvement journey. This is led by one of my deputy medical directors, Dr. Hay, and we have also just appointed a clinical lead for VTE to continue to drive the improvement. There have been, as noted there, the VTE improvement programme. So there have been sessions that have been well attended by our clinicians, and we're continuing to bring this up in each of our regular meetings in terms of with our divisional CMOs and also our clinical leads. There's also been a focus on that in terms of monitoring via the monthly performance reviews in terms of an area of particular focus, but we are seeing continued improvement and on trajectory with the quality committee. From a mortality point of view, we've obviously just gone into that in terms of the more detailed report, and that's obviously just a summary there of what we've just discussed. Happy to take any questions.
Can we just say what BT means, just for people
For the
who might be?
Yes, so this is to do with the assessment to look at somebody's risk when they come into hospital of getting a clot, either in the leg, which can then go and flow off to the lung, which is potentially very serious. It's more at risk when people are unwell, particularly if they're immobile, so that they're more at risk of getting clots in the legs and therefore consequently a PE polyembolus in terms of a clot to the lung, which is obviously very serious and in some cases can be fatal. So it's obviously very, very important that we both do the assessment and then also act on the assessment in terms of what's required, which can either be things like an injection of something to thin the blood or sometimes mechanical devices where we pump in terms of around the calf and thigh to try and prevent those clots from happening.
Great. Any further questions on this section?
Want to do questions by section or wait to the end? Of
I would wait to, well, I was just wondering because we'd had one question, I thought I'd bring them in then. Over to you to stop.
Okay, Alan.
So from the people domain, I have to say again that the data and the reporting issues still continue because of the skewing of data because of the transfer to One LSC, so particularly around vacancy data, and that's because the budgets haven't yet transferred. That has now been agreed to happen at the beginning of October, and so from October data onwards we will have those issues addressed. So just in terms of the vacancy rates, they are actually increasing, even if you discount the One LSC skewing of the data. They are in special calls, variation calls. And in particular, worth noting here is the increasing nursing vacancy rate month on month. Susan mentioned earlier that we will have no midwifery vacancies, which is a fantastic position to get to. But we do have increasing numbers of nursing vacancies, and that is being managed through the ability for us to be able to redeploy people as we go through organisational change and restructuring, but also to make sure that we can appoint our qualifying students as they qualify this year. Equally, if you triangulate that with the fill rates, the fill rates are still positive, which shows that we are still using bank appropriately to ensure safe staffing levels. Time to hire has increased, and that is because of significant workforce shortages within the recruitment team, but they are again being held pending the restructure work that's going to happen within One LSC, and mitigation options are being discussed with chief people officers across the system on the 15th of September. Finally, on vacancies, there is a review of vacancies that are not currently being backfilled that's going to happen through the pay control group, aligned with some of the financial recovery work that we'll talk about as we with the agenda, to look at where there's an opportunity for any of those vacancies to be safely disestablished. From a sickness absence perspective, we remain in common cause variation, and sickness is just over 5%, which means that we remain the best performing in this Lancashire and South Cumbria system, and one of the best performing in the region. And one of the things that is really critical to this is the occupational health service in the proactive work that they do and the reactive work. And you can see in particular the increase in demand for the psychological support services, which again still have very, very positive responses, but also positive, even though the wait times have increased, they are still very competitive and responsive to critical needs as our colleagues are experiencing them. Final thing really is on appraisal, and this is the non-medical appraisal. So it does remain in special cause variation, cause of concern, and is an area of specific focus within all of the divisional performance reviews. The focus is also though on the quality of those appraisal discussions, because we know that that has consistently been an area of concern for us through the feedback that we get through the National Staff Survey. Each of the divisions has been asked to develop their recovery plans, and we've really challenged some of that in the performance review of the divisions to ensure that they are realistic and achievable, and this encourage them to identify where we might want to take a further drop in some areas to enable us to phase those appraisals more evenly throughout the course of the year to avoid some of the pressure points applying at particular points of the year.
Thank you. The financial results are for July, month 4, and we reported a position 2.7 million adverse to our plan. Predominantly this relates to slippage in our waste reduction programme. In the month, we did see a deterioration of 1.8 million against our plan. Plan in July was quite a significant surplus due to the number of working days in the month where income is earned, and we achieved a small surplus in the month. That said, our run rates, i.e. what we are expending every month, are relatively consistent, and have only fluctuated due to the cost of industrial action that we incurred. We have seen some slight deterioration in some elements of our income in diagnostic imaging and community diagnostic centres, but we've got corresponding vacancies in the CDCs that offset the majority of that income loss. The service are currently reviewing that business case just for us to make sure that we can align that. Our non-pay controls remain established and in place and are consistent, so that's a really positive outcome. We are also looking at some other areas of our non-pay to see if we can improve that further. Agency performance remains below the cap, which is excellent. The cap is 1.9%. and we are aiming for an outturn position of 1.3%. The majority of the agency expenditure is in the medical staffing areas, and we still are not expending any in nursing areas. I've touched on waste reduction. That's an area that obviously is the key focus of our teams and a key focus of the change and sustainability programme structure that we have revitalised, is probably the right word, in the last few months, and we've shared that with colleagues across the organisation as part of our story. It is a challenging target. We've got robust plans, and we've got a plan that does start to touch into next year. We will be developing that further to have a 3-year plan that will go alongside our finance strategy. Cash obviously becomes a challenge when we are reporting slight deficits, and as it stands, we are not anticipating that we will need cash support as long as our action plans are established on time. So we've had a significant drive to ensure that all colleagues are aware of that, and ensure also that we have relevant grip and control processes in place to maintain cash as long as possible. The accounts payable team obviously consistently monitor debt recovery to support that. Our capital programme is behind plan. This is predominantly due to supply chain delays, or the teams getting plans to required standards before we can progress the estate work. We do have a number of large schemes that are underway. The RLI maternity bereavement scheme is underway, and there have been quite a number of delays in that area, so that's good news. And we have approved a business case for a CT scanner that's now been submitted to the national team.
Thank you. And then finally to Access. So I guess the summary for Access is the data in the pack relate to June, and actually in that period, it's a reasonably scorecard. Over July and August, we've seen a further kind of pressure on our performance in several of the quadrants, several of the domains, sorry, that I'll go through. For urgent care, you see in the 4 hours and 12 hours, that kind of common cost variation where we go anywhere between 73 to 75%. We are pressured in urgent care, certainly over the course of August, earlier than I would hope and expect. So we've had a couple of conversations between the exec team and the divisional teams around how we get ahead of this almost, and you'll hear more about the seasonal winter plan later in the board. We've of course got the enduring issues with demand plans before people use our services, and then the exit block at the back end of our services. One of the things we're going to do as an intervention is very helpfully exploiting Helen's arrival is be an early phase 2 adopter of the GIRFT, so getting it right first time, urgent and emergency care programme. So that's a national programme with external expert colleagues who will come in and use a different methodology, but it won't be a repeated diagnostic because we know the diagnosis, although it's helpful to have a kind of contemporary independent view of that, but really help us with the actions we need to take, and that's a kind of clinically led national programme. Helen's our leader in that programme nationally, so we're going to be early adopting that. Helen and I have had the meeting with the colleagues that are going to lead that, and that we hope will start in anger in October.
Visits this month, and so that we'll get some of the diagnostics and 3 or 4 things that we'll be concentrating.
And so I think our performance, like I say, is we'd like it to be better, but as we go into winter. So we've got some immediate actions that we discussed just yesterday, actually in detail with the divisions, but we'll also get a step ahead of that with the UEC programme through GIRFT to really help us drive over the Q3 into Q4. On the upside, there would have been a case before where there was almost a direct correlation as our 4 and 12 hour performance deteriorated or in fact increased, there would be a commensurate increase or decrease of the same size in ambulance handover. We've kind of broken that cycle where although we've seen 4 hours and 12 hours more compromised, we've seen ambulance handovers stay the same or in fact improve. So we've made some good process changes in both of our emergency departments, and credit to them given the pressure and the congestion they're under chronically, to do a good job in these early stages of the new 45-minute handover rule for ambulances. And we've not seen any significant impact of that 45-minute handover. Again, the test will be over the seasonal winter, but we've made better progress in the ambulance handover space. Not meeting criteria to reside, you'll see the continued common cause variation between 24 and 26%. I know there's a board session, I think, tomorrow on that. And so more more to do, and Lynn's got a very early view on some of the things that we might do differently, as is Helen. Cancer, 28 days and 31 days, we are doing well. 62 days, not so much. You'll see in page 178 that almost a third of that is in urology. We are confident that we'll see that increase. We are confident we've not seen any clinical harm as a result of that. But that's the first time that we've been at that level of 62-day performance for a couple of years. And so we'll we will improve that. We've got a trajectory to improve that. Diagnostics in the pack, you'll see the reported month of where it was 17%, having got as high as 24% over the 6-week standard, which was troubling because we've never ever been, we've traditionally been in the top 10% in England for our diagnostic performance. Pleased that that's now, as of this week, at less than 10%, and it's on trajectory to get back to its 5% by the end of this month, or certainly very early in October. And we've got some learning in terms of how we deployed resources over that period and the balance of resources and performance and workforce planning. And I'm happy to take any questions on that. For referral to treatment in the pack, you'll see the reported month was at 68% for 18 weeks referral to treatment. That did deteriorate over July and August. As today, we are at around 66.8%. We've got a straight line of sight to get to 67.8% by the end of the month, which would leave us 0.2% short of our 68% target by the end of the month. So we met just yesterday, and we're confident we'll stretch to or slightly above the 68% internal target by the end of September. I'll speak about some of the causes for that when I come to the slide on page 183. We may talk later in the meeting, either public or private, around the national focus on elective care and the balance between 18-week RTT and waiting list size, where there's a conflict between the two, which is quite technical, so we can come into the detail of that. One of the things I think, and it will be iterative with the board, is this was a known, and so as we did a good job of significantly reducing and then sustaining our variable pay, then we had choices to make on the cohorts of patients that we treat, and of course we treated new patients, always in order. Our cancer patients, our urgent patients, then our new patients. And as we do that, we start to see waiting list size increase. And so we've got some steps that will start to bring that down, but we will get into the balance of 18-week performance and waiting list size over the course of the next 2 quarters. Missed appointments, you'll see us hold that position of very near the 6.5%. If that graph on page 186 was to elongate backwards, the trust had been kind of 8 to 9% in missed appointments. So having that at 6.5 is the lowest in our system, and one of the lower in the country. The thing that, of course, we continue to focus on, and it's unfortunate it's not in the pack in this one, it usually is, so I'll make sure that features, is that the missed appointment rate for our core 20+ population is nearer 9%. I met just yesterday the 2 public health trainee colleagues that are now working with Chris Chiswell, one of whom's got a very specific focus and going to test out some new interventions and innovations in how we seek to improve the core 20+ population missed appointments by the use of artificial intelligence, some of the language we use in discharge letters, and some of the language we might use in text messaging and so on. So there's some work to address that. We should never miss, although in some ways it's a pleasingly boring graph at page 107, where it's all grey, but it's a good grey because it describes our now 3-year plus 90% plus achievement of the 2-hour urgent community response. That's not the case in many trusts across England. It's not blue because there's not a target for it in the sense of the other tier 1 targets. Finally, stroke. The thing, it's the first time that we brought it in this shape to the board. It's, I think I said at the quality committee, we need 2 PhDs to understand the stroke data these days. That's ever so complex. The reassurance is twofold. You'll see in the first paragraph on page 188 that this trust would rightly look at SNAP data, which said D&E, and be very concerned given some of the historical issues we had in stroke. You'll see in the first paragraph that of the 248 trusts in England, 224 of those are now at D&E because of the new scoring system. So that's nothing to be alarmed of. The second one is we have taken some detail through the F&P committee around those detailed tables that you see on page 188. What that would mean should we be using the old SNAP score, and how we would apply those numerators to the old scoring system. And our confidence is that that would retain us at an old SNAP A or B, likely a B. So it'll take a couple of months to work through the language of the new stroke system and the new scoring system, but there is some reassurance there. This is not a deterioration, this is a symptom of the new scoring system. Happy to take any questions for any colleagues, Chair.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions on the integrated performance dashboard? Start with Sarah.
Thank you. I've got a couple of quality assurance type updates, and then I've got 2 questions, if that's okay. So just in terms of quality assurance, just want to talk about a few of the points. So for the PSIF, the patient safety investigations, Lynn talked about the fact 16 of 19 commissioned PSIIs are overdue. So and it's something I picked up in my 3A's report. So we're supposed to complete it in 6 months. That's a national requirement, and we're not. So in June we discussed at Quality Assurance Committee that there was going to be an improvement trajectory put against those. We didn't have specific figures in June's committee, but we did note in August that we haven't improved against it, which we've really acknowledged is partly because it's the summer holidays. So what we've requested for October committee is a numerical update on which ones need to improve first, and then the remainder, and what the trajectory is for doing that. And it's particularly about the assurance about learning being undertaken and actions being taken. So that's really why we're particularly concerned with that. I just wanted to note on venous thromboembolism risk assessment, so Aaron could go about the target. So just a reminder that we know the national target is 95%, and we'd agreed that there's a trajectory over time to reach 95%. So it's a steps trajectory, and we're due to meet that June next year. So the target was to be at 75% by August, and then to push from there. We were assured by the progress that's being made, and obviously the key thing from the quality committee is to sustain that. We've seen a real increase actually as that clinical engagement has increased over the last 3 or 4 months. So it's, for me, it's showing the real value of the medical engagement with the QI work and quality improvement work. So I thought that was positive. I just wanted to note, Scott talked about urology cancer wait times having increased, and through our risk report we've had a Quality Assurance Committee, we have noted that there's a number of risks which are higher for urology, and because we know we have a historic challenge around our urology service, that's something that Quality Assurance Committee has asked for some additional assurance around. So we're due to receive a report on niche, the niche report, which was around investigation into urology service. For those who might not be aware of that, that's due to come to the October meeting, and we're due to receive an enhanced report which responds to the fact we've got those high risks. So I thought it was helpful to provide those as some additional questions. One's around core skills plus compliance. So on page 150 of the report, I noticed that adult life-saving skills are showing at 81%, which is flagging as red. And I can see the medical division is the main driver of that. But I'm sort of mindful of steps that have been taken in maternity around ensuring that where there's compliance required, that means that it relates to actual patient safety in the room at that time. That are we confident that those medics and clinicians who are in a room with a patient who requires ALS are up to date with their mandatory training, and if not, what steps are we taking? That's my first question.
I can start if you like. So clearly there are people who are not compliant, but this is a slightly different scenario, I think, than maternity, because the quantum of people is so much bigger. So there are always going to be more people who are available who are ALS trained, and we do need to take the actions to get the improvements up, and that again has been something that we're picking up within each of the divisions. But I think from a safety perspective, if we're not.
Yeah, I just from an ALS perspective, when I go back and look at the capacity to deliver, we have provided additional funding for the divisions through the HE pot, so that there's no pressure on the divisions to release staff to do that. So I will go back and check that.
Thank you. And just that point around, if we just some assurance around practice in a space, if the patient requires ALS at that time, and some assurance around the person being compliant with their training. I'm just conscious of the finding of the inquest, which was that somebody who was undertaking life-saving treatment wasn't compliant at that time.
That's a really good point, and we what we'll do is we'll look at the high risk areas where you would expect people to be ALS trained.
Particularly for the response teams, and we will just double check to make sure that there is something that we provide from an assurance perspective rather than reassurance.
That's great, thank you. Thanks very much. My second question was around finance, actually. So on page 165, sorry, of the report, there's a table about risks to the forecast outturn, and one of the lines in that relates to cost of change, showing us estimated 1.8 million, and obviously showing a likely scenario of 0.9 million. My point of concern, I suppose, and therefore looking for assurance, is that the mitigation that's listed is that we will exceed our waste reduction financial improvement programme delivery year, which will mitigate the redundancy costs, which is what that cost of change relates to. But I think all of the updates we're receiving is that we're off track on our WRFIP delivery, and so is that a realistic mitigation? Is that something that we need to consider as part of the programme?
In the main, it relates to the MARS scheme that we've approved. I think we've had a small and they are mitigated by the improvement for the scheme that they relate to. Right. So I got that assurance from my team last night. We included those that have been approved in our current forecast position. So whether or not we see any more towards the end of the year with the other programmes of work is part of that risk, as it stands.
Okay, thank you. I suppose it's just a question for me about the macro of the WRFIP programme, that we need to deliver those surpluses in one bit to get improvements in one bit in order to offset costs in other bits.
That's right, and we do have criteria around that, so we need to pay back within a certain period of time to enable that benefit to our work cost.
Karen.
Oh, thank you. So one comment, if I may, and then two questions. And this was partly raised in the last Quality Committee in August, and we will follow it up in October. But in essence, it's relating to sickness absence. And whilst it's very positive that we are best in the system in terms of overall sickness absence, a concern that was raised at the last People Committee was the impact of short-term sickness absence that may well not meet the criteria for reporting. And this came out of a point of triangulation from Ned Walkabouts and also some feedback from our staff side colleagues that staff were beginning to raise concerns about the pressures felt very short term, potentially on the day in the short term sickness absence. Now, it's not something that we're currently seeing on the IPR, but it's just to highlight to board that there was an action from the last People Committee to go back to the Performance and Quality Programme Board and divisional colleagues to explore how we can establish greater clarity and greater line of sight on the short-term sickness absence, the divisional pattern and the impact on colleagues. So it's just to make the board aware of that. And I guess that's the significance of the IPR is a fabulous tool, but there's a point about being minded about what it might not be showing us and always be open to those potential blind spots. So that was just the point. Couple of questions, if I may. One actually relates again back to our learning from the inquest recently and the significance of role-specific essential training. And it's just a question as to whether there's a timeline for when we can begin to see our compliance with the role-specific essential training as distinct from the core skills mandatory training that is nationally set. So shall I stop after that question before I go on to the next?
Well, I think both of those questions hopefully go forward to Ali. So
Yeah. So
Okay. My second question is a finance question, actually. So this first one's for Ali.
well, I'll let Ali respond and then we'll come back
Okay.
to you.
Thank you.
all sickness is reported. So whether it be
Okay.
1 day or 3 weeks, it's all reported. So there's no differential in the trigger for reporting.
Okay.
And we are picking up in all of the performance reviews some really specific questions around the management of and seeking assurance around the management of all short-term sickness and long-term sickness. So that's being picked up. I think the important thing to recognise though is that where there is short-term sickness, this is where the roster management kicks in and where we are utilising bank to address those shortfalls if that is an issue from a safe staffing perspective. And each of the rosters, each of the establishments has an uplift built in to assume for a certain amount of sickness absence. So it's not necessarily just as straightforward as saying if somebody is off sick you will automatically backfill them, because that's not necessarily going to be the case because of that uplift that's built into the establishment automatically, and that's where the professional judgment around that safe staffing comes into this. So whilst I accept that there is pressure that's caused by sickness absence, there is, I think, a bit of an education for us to do with our colleagues around just because somebody is off sick in a clinical area doesn't mean that they would automatically result in that person being backfilled or in need for that person to be backfilled for that particular shift. So I think we will pick up that education aspect. And then in terms of the job specific training, let me pick that up, Karen. I can't give you the timeline now, but it is being picked up through the Education Programme Board. So let me pick that up with them and come back with a specific timeline.
Thank you, Ali, and really happy to give them more focused attention through People Committee. Thank you. And my finance question is, and I haven't. Apologies, Helen, if this is in there and I just haven't spotted it. But do we have a specific line so we're clear about the cost of? It's the kind of externally determined staff suspension. So it may be intervention and judgment of external professional bodies, so notably the GMC or the NMC, where we have no choice but to suspend staff pending investigation. Is that something that's quantified and that we can see as a line so we understand the cost of that, particularly where those staff are needing to be replaced? Perhaps by locum or other arrangements.
We don't report it as a matter of cost, Karen, no. But if we were asked the question, Alan would be able to provide me with the detail of the who and who supported, and we would be able to demonstrate the cost. And we do have a regular cost we have that in most years where there are necessary things going on. But if it's in relation to particular individuals who would be able to provide that, we don't report it as a matter of course.
No, I think it might just be, my thought is it could be helpful just to understand what that cost is. I know it's significantly out with our control if it's externally determined, but given the forensic detail and insight we have on some of our costs, I think it would be really valuable to understand that one.
We report consultancy fees as part of our annual accounts, which you would expect those costs to be part of.
Alan?
So I think, Karen, I would suggest that we could pick that up and put it in the Fair Experience for All report that comes to People Committee. That's the most sensible way. And actually, exclusion tend to be a trust decision rather than from an external regulator or as an external professional body.
Right, that's even more helpful if it's something that we have greater control of. So yeah, really happy for it to come that route via Fair Experience for All. Thank you. Thanks both.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to go Tony, Mike, and then Nicola. So Tony first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the quality of the reports. Much appreciated. On 146, one specific question. It says nursing vacancies are rising month to month. It's just to get a sense of what that means in terms of numbers. And then with the redeployment, are we plus or minus after redeployment? And then the third question specifically is in terms of the nurse vacancies rising. Looking at it here, what's your perception or understand as to what is maybe behind that? Is it just time of year? Is it an age-related matter?
So, and Lynn will help with this. So that it's multifactorial.
Right.
So, Lorna has done lots of work in terms of mapping the proposed kind of organisational changes and what that would mean, and has a really, really clear view of the pipeline in terms of the people who are coming through who are newly qualified, the people who are coming through our apprenticeship programmes, and we are mapping that together. I'm sure Lynn will give you a sense of what the balance looks like. But I think one of the key things that we need to remember here is that fundamentally we've got a shift in the approach in the organisation. So historically there was a very significant focus on international recruitment, that has dropped quite significantly. We haven't done international recruitment for quite some time now, where our efforts have been put into lots more of the apprenticeship programmes to enable us to grow our own, and that aligns with, if you remember, what was in the 10-year plan, where there is a requirement for us to reduce the number of people that we recruit from overseas, with a more of a focus around apprenticeships and growing our own. So it's multifactorial, but Lynn might want to.
Yeah, we do have a service staffing update on the agenda. But just to say, when we get to September and the student nurses are in post and we get beyond phase 2, we're confident that most of those vacancies will be filling. We have been sort of on a national call around the the guarantee to give student nurses a job, which for some trusts is causing significant problems because their vacancy rates are very small. We've provided for that. We've got Lorna will talk about it, a much longer term view of our own apprentices, student nurses and vacancies. And we've just reminded the divisions not to go out to advert for registered nurses because we've got the student nurses coming in, so we're confident that we'll have a better position.
So that's really helpful clarification. It's just to be clear what the relationship is with that. And then my next question, we can maybe defer to the session tomorrow, no, not meeting criteria to reside. It was just a specific question about the delay of codes implementation, about understand about that. But if you're okay, Chair, we can pick that up. Yeah. I think that was specifically mentioned. And then the last one was on the on 180, so let me just get the right table. Yes, the RTT in the 65 weeks. I know we were waiting for some clarification about the finance or bid of it submitted. Scott, I don't know, is that still in abeyance?
So the bid, Tony, you're right, was around 18 weeks. And you'll see in the on page 180, it expresses the target there as 75.1%. And that was to comply with the national planning guidance. So that took our outturn position from Q3 last year, and added the 5% ask on it. As the board knows, we are resourced to achieve 70.1%. We are waiting to hear back from the regional transformation bids. We took one in expressly for this, to see how much that will fill within that 5% gap. And once we receive those, which I think we expect this month, don't we?
I think we were expecting it at the end of August, actually.
Yeah, so that's imminent. That'll either, that will, if successful, that will eat into anything between 0 and 5% of that gap. If there is a remaining gap, then the regional feel that would be a conversation between us and the ICB to talk about how that gap is solved.
Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Mike?
Yeah, mine's for Ali. Page 157, Ali Poplar Health DNAs. It's been broken down into the divisions. Is that one of the discussions that goes on with the divisional directors each month, and it sort of focuses on that?
Yes, it is. So again, that would be looking forward to reviews. And what we are also doing is we're in the process of transitioning to a new occupational health electronic patient record system as we move together across Lancashire and South Cumbria. So we're all moving to the same system with the same configuration. What that will do is make some changes which we think will have some positive impact on DNA rates, because it has more of a focus on kind of personal ownership of booking. So we'll see how that tracks through as we get into the implementation of the new system as well. But yes, it is being picked up directly with each of the divisions.
Thank you. Nicola?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for really well presented, accessible reports, much appreciated. My questions about the PEPs. There was a number of things where the PEP is related to in these reports, and I'd like to see some maybe more reassurance, but at the strategic level, that the digital capabilities that we're investing in and we're developing, will they enable us to generate intelligence regarding our patients? And I'm sort of drawing that back to what we were discussing earlier today about the importance of understanding our patients' needs and requirements so that we can improve their experience, but also I think in the correlation there with understanding our patients' needs when it comes to their engagement with us, their DNAs at different parts of their journeys. And as we start to use more generative AI, do we have the semantic analysis capabilities in there that you can actually extract that sort of free text information and provide it into the appropriate clinical information and records that we need it to? So it's not just necessarily just helping us to include process and coding, but actually it's helping us to build that intelligence about.
Scott, do you want to?
So I think so yes, mostly, but that's the answer. So I think certainly when I speak to colleagues in other trusts, the stuff that we've done with the PEP is ahead of where other places have got to. Some of the semantic stuff I referenced earlier that our public health colleagues are working on is it's not unique, but it's quite bespoke for here. And we're just people asking us what we're doing, and I think the further development of that and looking at semantics, AI, discharge letters, text messaging, and other is so. I guess I think we've got a reasonably good set of ingredients, but your challenge, I think, is the right one. It needs to endure, which is, I think it wouldn't take much more for us to really step ahead. So yeah, where that happens, what committee that comes to, I've not thought about, but there's definitely some good work. There's some good people on it. There's people looking at us and asking us what we're doing and how. but there is a leap for us to take into the next step, I think.
That is exactly my point, is that I do think we've got some really great capabilities. The reputation is starting to progress out there. But how do we actually ensure that the strategy is on the long term is sustainable?
Yeah.
Because it's quite a complex architecture that it's working in.
I agree, because the risk is that we get excited about a subset of it and we end up in a cul-de-sac. But actually, I think the point about the strategic view of what the next kind of 1, 2, 3 years look like for that's an important one.
Yeah, so it might be helpful to take a conversation offline from a technical perspective. But just from an assurance perspective or a reassurance perspective, there is some work that we're doing now across the patch, so led by Stephen Dobson now, who's the Chief Information Officer for the for One LSC, and Andy and his team are really heavily involved in this and obviously have led the way. But there's an awful lot of work in there around the data validation, the data architecture, the Databricks environment is going to be built or even now available to allow us to do that free text analysis as well as the structured language analysis. But I can pick that up separately with you.
We need to. I think the key thing is also ensuring that we get into those conversations, we keep them to the level of the understanding as well. What is everybody needs to have that assurance that the technology is doing what it is capable of doing, and we're getting the best out of it.
Just to kind of further that, we have agreed that we will move to have a digital data and technology subcommittee of the board from the new year as well, which will have a
we
key
can do the
debate.
deep dives
Exactly.
and bring the assurance back.
Yeah. And that governance process is being replicated across trusts as well. So we'll have some standardisation and sharing.
Great.
If I could just add in there, Chair, that obviously I was aware of this work that we were doing here in this system, and in actual fact, I've been contacted by non-executive directors with a digital oversight elsewhere in the country who really want to learn about what we are doing with digital, and actually more importantly how we are governing that, so that we're actually bringing the assurance back to the board, and the board is getting a sight of it.
Thank you. If we're happy to note the integrated performance dashboard, I'm very keen, just so everyone's aware, I'm very keen for us to still be able to have a 10-minute break for coffee coming up shortly, but we are running about 15 minutes behind schedule. So we're going to start on the 3A's report, but we'll see what progress we make before taking a brief break. So turning to the 3A's report from the assurance committees, we'll start with the audit committee. Nick, anything you'd like to?
Just get my notes up. Yeah, on the in April, the AC reviewed the internal audit of consultant job planning. This was limited assurance, so we asked for an update at the July board, which the Associate Director for Strategic Medical Workforce came, and they reassured us on those actions that are being taken. We have asked for this to be given more extensive oversight at the People Committee, and then it will be brought back to the Audit Committee for further review. We also approved on behalf of the board the updated emergency planning resilience group, TOR, and the BAF, the Board of Assurance Framework and standard operating procedures. We also approved the risk management strategy ahead of that being brought to board today. These were all subjected to some amendments, and in regard to the BAF SOPs, there was quite a bit of feedback, which I looked to the Trust Secretary to confirm have been acted on when we come to that item today. The committee was assured by the progress being made around clinical learning, and I think that's really important considering the conversation we had earlier today after the patient stories. And I would like to see relevant updates, please, being reflected in future reporting and oversight processes, both the committee and the other relevant committees. So I think there's a very strong tie-in between that conversation we had earlier today and a similar one we had at the Audit Committee. And the Audit Committee welcomed the new financial control environment, which will improve how we identify breaches in processes and around payments, recovering debt, and those sorts of areas that will give us greater control. So we welcome that.
Thank you. Nicola, any question on audit? Any points raised? No. People committee, Karen.
Thank you. Just to confirm, firstly, that Nicola's point around the medical appraisals, the progress with that is picked up in detail through the People Committee and will continue to be so. I've already mentioned the alert around early signs of the impact of resource constraints. So this is very much early warning signs, but as a committee, we can keep those under some close scrutiny. Just going to the advice section, we recommended approval of the occlusion reports. They're coming later in the agenda, so I won't dwell on those. Just to highlight, though, that the committee were particularly noted the increase in bullying and harassment from patients and service users towards staff. So a particular focus on the Zero Hate campaign, and the committee will take some further reporting and updating on that in October. But otherwise, the committee recommended approval of those inclusion reports. With regard to flu vaccination rates, we're required to improve those by 5% on last year's achievement. And just note that in the absence of any additional funding to achieve that, peer vaccinators are going to be an essential resource. So the committee is very keen that that is picked up at the through the divisions, with some kind of specific focus on staff that will be named unable to do that. Committee really supportive and pleased to see the establishment and work of the divisional people forums, and that's really strengthening the people services governance structure at divisional level. And really welcomed the really positive impact from the divisional director contributions to the committee, and really keen to see that continue to go forwards. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we're going to extend the committee meetings by 30 minutes because there's just a real volume, breadth and depth of work. Sorry, just missing that. You can see all of the assurance that came through the committee, and with a particular focus on the people-related key lines of inquiry in the performance accountability framework with our divisional colleagues. And I'll stop there and just invite any questions.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions for Karen? No. Thank you very much. Amin is unable to join us. I think he was hoping to join us, but I think he's unable to join us. Tony, is there anything you would be able to feedback on Finance Performance Committee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's two chairs' reports for July. The only reference point is about the winter pressures plan, which endorsed the proposed expenditure of £500,000, and that's to shortly follow. In terms of the August committee, just some headlines, some similar themes here that triangulate with other committees. As we've heard through the performance reports, we were alerted to the fact that the unmitigated forecast for month 4 indicated a 6.4 million adverse variance to the plan, including a deterioration of approximately 0.4 million due to industrial pressures. At the governors' meeting, we talked about challenge and about, are we confident about where the numbers will eventually rest in regards to the waste reduction improvement plan. I just want to, for the public record, confirm that we do have similar conversations as reflected in the notes. So we had a lot of conversation about the waste reduction improvement plan. In essence, it's that balancing act between the plans and, as it says in the notes, identifying mitigations for delivery slippage, which the teams are working incredibly hard on. But that also needs to be taken in context of pay, non-pay, income, etc. So a lot of conversation about that, and the committee is going to keep a very close eye on that delivery. We were also speaking about, which came up in the People's Committee, about the impact in terms of performance and safety, not safety, but in terms of quality, potentially safety, possibly around the performance in terms of the targets as a consequence of these pressures. Again, we were given assurance by the Chief Operating Officer that there will be processes and arrangements made and put in place to ensure that performance and process is monitored and measured. As you've heard in an early report from the Chief Medical Officer, a lot of conversations about coding, the clinical coding. Again, we had a lot of detailed conversations. The committee was reassured that the management of backlog would be undertaken with recruitment underway to have a positive impact, so we should have next. I think those are the main highlights, but again, there's a lot of triangulation with what the Council of Governors has said in the recent Council of Governors meeting and obviously the other committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate you stepping in to cover that. Are there any questions for Tony? If not, we'll continue and try and get through the next two reports before taking a break. So, Quality Committee, Sarah.
Thank you. The first thing I was alerting on actually was the coding delays, which obviously picked up as part of the mortality report. But I think it is important to note that I know that priority has or was placed on income generating coding, but I think there's a risk we did sort of slightly take our eye off the ball on the quality and safety coding, and we're seeing that reflected now in the fact that some of our mortality report, we're having to seek additional assurance or reassurance around patient safety. So really reassured that there is a plan in place to increase capacity to improve that. And I think it's just really important that we note that. I think in terms of a lesson for future, if we do need to think about maintaining that data. The other things to advise on, we've got the consent item later, which is the annual infection prevention control report. The committee received that. Lynn's already referred to infection reporting as part of the integrated performance report. And I think we just did want to flag that spike in gram-negative bloodstream infections, which were above trajectory in 24-25 and have continued to spike. So we know there's an ongoing review going on, and I obviously look forward to recommendations of that. One of the things that we've been waiting for and received in August was an update on the implementation and effectiveness of the quality impact assessments and the quality impact assessments, particularly relating to transformation programmes. And I think it would be fair to say we weren't assured by the report that we received. In effect, the medium to high risk quality impact assessments haven't yet been fully reviewed or mitigated. So we are reassured that there's a performance improvement plan underway, working with the divisions to track and review those. But we have requested that the next report to the committee includes a summary of the progress on those high and medium risk QIAs, and also assurance that the mitigations that have been put in place that reduce the risk are in place and are having the desired effect, I think, as well. We had a big agenda, so I have no apologies. There's a lot under the quality and safety portfolio. Again, later in this agenda, we've got under consent the report of the North West Clinical Senate Review into Furness General Hospital and Critical Care. We received that report at Quality Assurance Committee and discussed it. We understand it's a recommendation or consideration at this time, and that further work is underway, and that is the purview of the ICB. What we're keen to ensure as we go forward is that there's an appropriate plan in place to maintain the skills, capacity, quality of service, whether it's level 2 or level 3, and we're expecting a report to come back in probably about 6 months' time, which will help to provide some assurance around that. We also received an update on an outcome of the review of patients who are in our care who no longer meet critical medical criteria to reside. We know there's a deep dive tomorrow, but I thought it was important from the assurance point of view to confirm to board that that review showed that there's very low harm for any patients in our care who don't meet criteria to reside. So we were assured by that, but we also recognise and note that it has significant impact on in the ED and in patient flow through the hospital, and therefore there may be other harms that may come from the volume. So obviously that continues to be an area of focus. Nearly there. We received the patient relations report as well, the annual report, which again is a consent item on the agenda, so I thought it was important to note. What we're particularly interested to see is the thematic learning that's coming from patient relations, patient experience, and understand the actions that are being taken. And we've also asked for some benchmarking so we can understand actually how our patient relations experience compares with other trusts. And we also wanted to see some detailed actions in the future relating to the responses we take for upheld or partially upheld complaints as well. I think probably in the interest of time, I will stop there. I think those were the key things I just wanted to make sure we'd covered today.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? If not, the final report on the Transformation and Improvement Board. Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. Just some headlines. The meeting was joined by Dr. Helen Skinner, which was great. Welcome. And Caroline Forrest is the new Director of Transformation. So that's some great contribution to the meeting. Just broadly in terms of the overall approach, the priorities have been slightly realigned given the changes in executive lead, and there's a smarter way of reporting, which I'll talk about in a minute. I think gaps going forward is we need an overarching plan in terms of a Gantt chart process, which clearly determines the sequencing. So that's going to be followed up. More importantly, with metrics, and it links to some of the points we've just discussed. Moving forward, we need to be clear in terms of what the potentially impacted benefits are in terms of quality, safety and finance regarding those programmed works. And at the minute that's been put together. The final point is also on this is that the transformation piece is kind of got to be slightly configured in context of the 10-year plan. And obviously the board development session should provide a platform for the next non-execs to get an oversight of the current plan moving forward. More specifically, work streams flagged under the new arrangements, which were read, were gynecology and also no criteria to reside. And then those that are amber, again, clinical service reconfiguration pathways for trauma and orthopedics, children and young people. Work is in process to kind of accelerate those appropriately within other considerations. I think the kind of key final message was that the team noted that the direction of travel was positive. There's a lot of work going on. I think there was uncertainty about the delivery of the waste reduction improvement plans within the current financial year. And again, that triangulates with conversations elsewhere, as well as with the conversation at the governance meeting. And that's not to say they won't be, but I think there's a bit of an ambiguity about, given now we're into September and the pace of change, and if you look at the profile in there that's available, that there's a lot of being backed up into the year, and it's about how that's going to be accommodated within all the other things that the trust is doing. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any questions for Tony? If not, are the Board of Directors happy to note the contents of all those reports? Yeah, if we are, great. It is 11:10. I'm going to call a 10-minute coffee break. I will see everyone again at 11:20. Thank you.